almost all factories in the South stopped casting of cast iron. In 1918, not a single factory was working at full speed. In 1919, the production of pig iron in the South fell to 0.9%, and in 1920, 2.5% against pre-war time. A little higher was the level of pig iron production in the central region, in the north and in the Urals. But this was absolutely not enough to meet the needs of the country. No previous reserves could compensate for such a fall in production. At the same time, the rational use of metal reserves often encountered sabotage. Here is one example that shows what saboteurs did with the most valuable goods during the Civil War. In the Nizhny Novgorod raid, a wandering cargo was discovered, which for 3 years was being driven along the Volga. The cargo belonged to the Maritime Department. On 7 barges, released on September 27, 1917, there was metal, cars, etc. 1 barge was already sunk. Among the iron there was a lot of valuable equipment for the industry. In addition, there were 40,000 pounds of high-grade steel on barges, 4,000 pounds of chromium nickel steel, large amounts of brass, nickel, antimony, etc. Meanwhile, many items from the barges were nowhere to be found. Factories felt an acute need for them, and saboteurs chased the valuable cargo along the Volga for 3 years. Only supplies of steel could provide for more than a month of work of factories on orders of artillery control. CACC, Fund 130, BV 1919, Case 42, Sheet 41. Machine building was badly damaged during the Civil War. The production of locomotives was reduced to 14.8% from the pre-war time, plows to 13.3%, wagons to 4.2%. Production of sugar fell to 6.7%, cotton yarn to 5.1%, vegetable oil to 3.3%, cement to 3.0%, refractory brick to 2.2%, red brick to 2.1%, ore extraction, up to 1.7%. The smelting of copper has completely ceased. In a relatively better position compared to other branches was the extraction of peat, the production of which amounted to 97.7% of pre-war time. This industry was paid by Lenin personally. Most of the textile industry enterprises were stopped mainly because of a lack of raw materials. For example, in 1920, out of 215 factories of the cotton industry, only 97, or 45.1%, worked under incomplete load. In the woolen industry, out of 114 enterprises, 83 factories operated partially. In silk, only 32 out of 50 factories worked. The only exception was the linen industry, which was better provided with raw materials, where 68 out of 69 factories worked, albeit with incomplete workload. Statistical Yearbook of 1918, 1920, Volume 2, CSO, 1922, page 270. The general reason for the decline in the production of key industries was the lack of fuel, food and raw materials. The World War and the management of the capitalists inflicted a heavy blow to the coal industry. The mobilization of skilled workers by the Tsarist government, and then the disruption of transport, the lack of fastening timber and other materials, the housing and food crisis had a sharp impact on the state of the mine economy. After the victory of the October Socialist Revolution, the sabotage of coal kings, direct wrecking and, finally, the management of the Kornilov Krasnov gangs completed the devastation in the Donbass. In 1920 years, Donbass was the arena of civil war. Most of the time in these years the Donbass was either in the hands of the White Guards, or in close proximity to the fronts. The coal industry was particularly affected by the disruption of transport. Already in March 1919, for the unloading of mines from coal reserves, it was necessary to resort to special, heroic measures. So, At Grushinsky Mines, because of a lack of own vehicles, it was necessary to mobilize the horse transport of nearby villages. The transport situation can be illustrated by the following data. By the end of the Civil War, the total number of rolling stock of railway transport was reduced, locomotives to 92.3% against 1913, and the car fleet decreased to 88.5%. The percentage of 16 locomotives and wagons increased tremendously, amounting to 58.3 in the locomotive engines and 1,920 24.2 in freight cars, 24.2 in freight cars and 40.4 in passenger cars. Due to the disruption of rail transport, the export of fuel from the Don base was drastically reduced, and this further worsened the supply of coal to the national economy.